People of Reddit who knew celebrities before they were famous. How different do they act now? My grandpa, RIP, owned a grocery store in Miami in the late 70s. Wesley Snipes and his friends once stole some candy from his store, and when he caught them he let them have it. Since then Wesley and his friends were regulars. Once, Wesley left his bike in front of the store and it got stolen. Was a pretty bad area. My grandpa gave him his old bike that he kept in the back of the store. My uncle took over in 2001 when my grandpa died. In 2007 he came back to the store while my uncle and cousin were there. To ask about my grandpa. My uncle said they talked for a little over an hour about how my grandpa treated him like a son. When he found out my grandpa passed he felt guilty he didn't visit sooner. He embraced my uncle and cousin and left. My uncle said he told him they plan on having the building repainted while they talked. About a week later a crew of painters arrived and told my uncle they were already paid to have the building repainted. Such a genuine dude. Edit. Sorry I haven't been able to reply to everyone. But thank you guys so much for love. Even though he's often portrayed negatively. Glad to see that people still try to find the best in us. Even it's a small gesture. This is real late and secondhand, but I knew someone who went to ACM with Ed Sheeran. He said he was lazy in class. Skipped classes and just wanted to smoke weed. And my acquaintance was mad when Ed started getting more and more famous when Ed didn't even bother with his music courses. I thought that was funny. I went to college with Joe Keery aka Steve Harrington in Stranger Things. He was my college boyfriend's sweet mate and just the nicest guy. His hair has always been dreamy and amazing. Last time I saw him was at a viewing of The Hateful Eight after we graduated, and he still made a point to come over and say hi. Edit. Spelling. Work in a restaurant about 15 years ago as a manager. Rachel Mcadams walked in for an interview. She was still in acting school and serving table to pay for it. She worked at my restaurant over the course of the next 2 summers, serving on our patio. Still friends to this day. She hasn't changed a bit. Still bikes to get groceries. Friend of mine was friends with Tom Hanks in high school and went to prom with him. He still writes her personalized B-Day cards on one of his typewriters. I went to junior high with Norah Jones. She was the most sincere and serene person. She was fun to talk to and she never gave a hint of who her father was. The night she won all those Grammys was very telling that she hadn't changed a bit. I went to high school with Mark Ruffalo. He was nice. He was one of those thespians. Our high school had an acting group that challenged the students to get out of their shell and do things in front of strangers, like introducing yourself as the wild fairy of the woods and presenting them with a flower. We didn't talk much. But like I said, he was a good guy. My aunt used to work with Gordon Ramsay's mother but never made the connection. Once they were out for lunch and he ended up coming in to see his mom and met my aunt in the process. She said he was so lovely and polite. Plus my dad has a bunch of Gordon's old jumpers he didn't want anymore. Not signed or anything like that. It's just a fun family story now. Went to middle school with Megan Fox for a bit. She rode my bus and she mostly kept to herself. Most of the guys would fight over who was going to sit next to her, but she was very shy and didn't really have much to say. I knew Brett and Jermaine. Flight of the Conchords. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And met Taika Waititi a few times too. I was a big fan of his art at the time. There was one painting of someone in a bathtub that stuck in my head. I knew Brett better than the others. Because he was in a reggae band with my good friend Barnaby. As far as I can tell, they are all exactly the same. I went to school with Rupert Grint. Ron Weasley from Harry Potter. I was into acting too. So we had done a few school plays together. He was really nice, very chill, a good laugh. I haven't seen him since school days. But he kept coming to classes whenever he wasn't filming. Was always happy to chat about the movies. Sometimes he'd need a little break from so many people wanting to talk. And would come and hang out in the library. And honestly, you'd never know he was in the biggest film series at the time. Honestly, I think a lot of these answers boil down to if they want fame or not. Rupert loved what he was doing, but didn't care about being famous and having people kiss his ass. Just a nice normal kid. A coworker of mine met Daisy Ridley while on a backpacking trip. Got to know each other pretty well while traveling together. She told my coworker that she wanted to become an actress. Looks like that panned out pretty well. They said Daisy was an absolutely lovely individual. My grandfather taught Jack Nicholson in high school math class. Said he was rebellious but wasn't too bad at math. My grandmother and mom were really good friends with George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley from Wham. They got invited to concerts and got to sit in special seats, etc. And a few years ago me and my family stayed with Andrew Ridgeley in his guest house in Cornwall for a weekend. But they seemed to me like they stayed really nice to my grandparents and mom. And Andrew Ridgeley was very kind to my family when we met him. I knew Robert Pattinson about 15 years ago. Nice guy. Friendly. A lot of fun to be with. He lived by himself in the center of Soho, London, in a tiny one-bed flat that I think he felt like the romantic vision of a starving artist. Or at least wanted to. He had a weird side. He'd say random, violent, depraved things. He was obsessed with Jack Nicholson. He never really gave a fuck. He had confidence and he was always himself. And he knew he could be deliberately contradictory and he used that as a personality trope. But he was a good guy. And I get the impression he's very comfortable with himself now that he has developed his career. That he acts very well. And that he can pick and choose his roles based upon what he wants to do and who he wants to work with. Twilight for him was always a means to an end. And I think he worked it very much to his benefit. And didn't compromise himself. My mom is friends with Johnny Knoxville's cousin. She met him once and had no idea who he was. She said he was nice and funny as all hell. She didn't realize until years later she'd even met him until I showed her one of his movies. From what I gather he's a normal dude and pretty hilarious. I live in the town where Dolly Parton grew up. And practically everyone above the age of 50 who grew up here claims to either be a distant relative of Dolly's. Or they claim to know her in some way. Everyone has their story of the time they met Dolly. It's pretty obvious. But regardless of who you talk to, Dolly has always been sweet and generous. But everything has simply grown exponentially due to her fame. Examples are the millions of books she gives out for free to children around the globe each month. Or how she gave out $10,000 cash to many of my close friends after their houses burned in a fire a couple years back. Thousands of people are employed here and work for one of the businesses she owns. And it's a tad strange to see when you walk in. But the birthing center at the local hospital is funded by and named after her. I honestly can't think of one person I know who doesn't like her. Dolly's heart has only gotten bigger because of fame. Bruno Mars's mom was a bartender at a local karaoke dive bar that I was a regular at. At the time, his biggest hit was The Hook for Billionaire by Travie McCoy. Anyway, she was selling tickets for an upcoming concert he was having and she asked our table if we wanted to buy some. My friend declined and she exclaimed, "Why not? He's my son." I ended up getting a couple of tickets despite not knowing any of Bruno Mars's songs. It turned out to be one of the best concerts I've ever been to. The guy knows how to put on a good live show. The tickets were only $40 each, I think. His opening act was a local group of large Polynesian men singing Motown who went by the name Nation 9. They were pretty good too. The next time he was in town for a concert, he had blown up and the tickets were going for $400. I would have loved to see him again. But not at that price. His mom was really nice. Down to earth. And a pretty good singer herself. Rip Bernie. At least she lived long enough to see her son's success. A friend of mine is buddies with Paul Rudd. Says he's exactly the same and a great human. My mom used to ride the bus to work in downtown Cleveland with Steve Harvey's first wife. Apparently she supported him while he was trying to get his career started. And then basically as soon as he got successful he divorced her for a younger woman. My mom always hated him because she felt that he treated his first wife like shit and always yells, "Bastard," at the TV when he pops up. Edit. Thanks for the gold. I told my mom that the internet likes her and hates Steve Harvey, so you've made her day. My coworker's dad grew up with Queen Latifah in North Jersey. His whole family loves her because they were about to lose their house, so she paid it off for them. They've never said a bad thing about her. Queen Latifah. If this gets back to you, thanks for what you did for your friends in NJ. Phil's a really cool guy. My mom knew Mel B from her high school. Apparently she always copied other people's work. My dad went to school with Steve Irwin. Reckons he was exactly the same as a young fella. He would be away from school all the time on trips with Bob to rescue and rehome crocs all over Australia. No good at footy but. My brother used to play basketball with a bunch of people in high school. Among those who would sometimes join in was Pete Davidson. My brother said he got ripped on a ton and no one really liked him, but that might just be because he wasn't great at basketball. One of my aunts actually dated Bill Gates for a bit. I believe a few years before things took off for him. She said he was too into her or something like that at the time and weirded her out, I guess. Sorry about the lack of detail. My 8th grade science teacher dated Bill Nye. Broke up with him because he didn't like kids. Kesha, total nerd. 1600 on her SATs. Quiet, a bit of a social outcast. Nice, though. You could tell she cared about others and wouldn't ever hurt a flea. I went to high school with Emma Chamberlain. She was a huge bully in high school and pretty much a brat who thought she could get away with whatever she wanted. Before she got famous, her parents were divorced, which led to them both always trying to be her friend and never actually parenting her. So they basically let her do whatever she wanted. When she said that people from her high school made fun of her because she was poor, and that the parking lot was all BMWs and Range Rovers, I lost my mind because she was the bully in high school. And while the school definitely had some wealthy students, it was mostly a middle-class crowd.